Welcome to a PREKURE Ask Me Anything podcast. I'm Professor Grant Schofield, and I'm joined with the other half of my R&D team, Kayla. Hi, Kayla.
Hey, Grant. Happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. Hey, so I'm thinking about, I guess the focus is on focus
Yeah.
or lost focus. And we've both been interested in a book by Johann Hari called Stolen Focus. And it's really about those things now that seem to undermine our ability to pay attention. And we seem to be rapidly shifting from one thing to another. And we're going to talk about some of the concepts like multitasking, why that's a myth, the problem of mobile phones, the concept of nomophobia, and so forth. So should we get started on that?
Yeah, let's crack straight in. So, the first thing that really sticks out to me when I started having a little bit of a dig into this area was this idea of attention switching and multitasking and the sort of impacts that these can have on our ability to function. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. In fact, I've just done a complete review of the literature again, and I know you've done that as well. I remember in a previous life when I was part of a company called Vitality Works, I'd go and do these workplace seminars and talk about well-being and health. And this is probably between 10 and 20 years ago. And even then I was talking about the notion of multitasking and why it's a myth, because the research even then was quite clear that we can't take multiple cognitive inputs. You can't read this and that or listen to this while you're reading that. We don't do that as a species. What we do is we shift our attention from doing one task, and then we go and look at and do another task. And it could be one's an audio task, one's a visual task. And the thing about shifting your attention is when you go back to one of the other tasks, you don't go and pick up where you left off. You take a while to get up to speed again. And so this attention shifting is known to really destroy cognitive performance. Well, not so much destroy, but it puts demands on it, which either means you take longer or you make more mistakes, or you do both. You take longer and make more mistakes. And so I guess Johann Hari's argument and stolen focus and some of the leading researchers in this world, Rosen, it's one of the guys at the University of California that really has done this work, psychologists done this work for decades now, is that we seem to be in a situation where science knows one thing, and in practice we do the opposite to that. So if you wanted to get work done, if you want to get work done, Kayla, what you would do, which I know you're actually very good at, you would sit down and do that task, and you put your mobile somewhere else in the house. And when you completed that task, we wanted to move on to another task, and you go and change. And I admire you for that.
Thank
and
you.
It's certainly one thing I really struggle with.
Yeah, I think I was listening to a very interesting podcast with where Johann Hari was being interviewed, and he talks about the switch cost effect. How when we try to switch rapidly between two different things, our brain is almost like a computer trying to run two lines of code simultaneously, and there's this cost that comes with that. Like anything in life, there's a cost attached to it. And he was talking about a really interesting piece of research that was done where they basically got people to sit down and do a task, and some of them were bombarded with emails and phone calls, and the other lot sat down and actually had a little bit of cannabis. And what they found is that, those that had the cannabis were definitely chilled out. But what happened was those that were bombarded with phone calls and emails and all sorts of other distractions, their IQ at the end of the day was actually 10 points lower. So whereas those who had the cannabis, their IQ had only dropped by 5 points. So there was a definite difference. So not saying that you should have cannabis rather than answer your emails, but sitting down and doing one task at a time definitely has a good effect on our brain. And there was that. And then there was this other idea that there's this 23-minute lag almost between interruption and getting back on track with what you were doing. I just thought that was profound.
Yeah. And first pass, that sounds like a massive effect, one that you'll never recover from. But frankly, when you actually have to do tasks, like for me, tasks that are actually really cognitively hard and require you to do actual work, writing.
Yeah.
And so, particularly I've had to write, like we've written, I don't know, 5 or 6 books now, from my backup book with all Black Wayne Shelford through to all the What the Fat series and What the Face, What the Fast season. So they actually do need to concentrate. And I found that if you actually came to work being an office where other people can interrupt you and you had your mobile with you and you did emails, then even on a day where I scheduled no appointments and I was just going to solely function and do writing, I might end up doing 1,200, 1,500 words.
Yeah.
Most of which wasn't that good. If I stayed at home and was not interrupted and concentrated on doing just that task, I could write 5 or 6,000 much better words. It's an astonishing thing. It's not actually possible, at least for me, to write a book if I'm interrupted. It's not a task that is even able to be completed.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's just, I believe that magnitude of effect. So you can imagine if you're just switching between phone and email and trying to work on your computer, this is all at the same time, how pointless that would be.
Oh, absolutely. And he talks about this idea of filtering and our brain being like a bouncer, and it can only push out so much interruption from noise or from visual stimulation for so much time before the bouncer gets tired and needs to go for a smoker. And then your brain basically can't keep filtering that information out. So that makes total sense that you would function better and write better in an environment where you have more control and there's less for you to filter out. Yeah.
So you know the situation where people are going, "Oh, how was today? Oh, busy, crazy busy.
Yeah.
Well, how productive you are. I never got most of the things done I wanted to get done." Actually, what you would like to hear from someone, "How was today? Oh, productive, crazy productive." Yeah, that's so busy and productive. Often not the same thing, and actually cognitively they can't be the same thing. If you've got those demanding tasks. Now, I'm not talking about there's sort of physical multitasking, right? You've got an egg on, you've got the Dyson out, you're boiling the kettle, I don't know, you're doing a few of those sort of physical tasks. The bar's not massive. Those are things like we'll engage in those, and those are fine. But the cognitive multitasking is a very different space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is Johann Hari also talks about in his book some stuff that here at PREKURE we believe in quite vehemently, and that's around the fact that this level of ultra processing in our environment is not just with our attention and our attention span. It actually is quite far reaching to our diet, our built environment, the way we sleep. Do you want to touch on any of those, Grant?
Well, I suppose what he's talking about when I read that work is that there's a mismatch between the biological organism that is us humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, and the sort of environments we've evolved in, and what we've managed to manufacture, which doesn't resemble those at all. So the food doesn't resemble what we've eaten. The activity environment is mainly sedentary and sitting down. The sleep environment is often pervaded by unnatural light from phones and houses and that sort of TV screens, that sort of thing. The interruptions you get are not what we get. So we call that whole environment, I guess, an ultra processed environment. It's no wonder we're having health and concentration issues, mental health issues. One term that really struck a chord with me, and I've actually been using it with people, and it seems to struck a chord with most people, is this idea of anxiety by being separated from your mobile device.
Yep.
And so they actually call that, what do they call that? Nomophobia. No mobile phobia.
Yep.
Yeah. And frankly, I suffer from that myself, but I can see my phone now. That's a comforting thing. But what I've noticed is that sometimes I can pick it up and have it opened almost automatically below consciousness. I don't even know why I've picked it up.
Yep.
And that scares me, frankly. I don't know if other people have that experience. Do you have that experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it really talks to the way that social media is designed. It's designed to hijack our attention before we even know that it's happening. And some of the creators of Facebook and Gmail and some of the apps that we all use on a day-to-day basis have actually come out and admitted that. The whole purpose of designing these apps was to steal your attention for as long as possible so they could collect a whole bunch of data about you. At the end of the day,
and sell that data.
exactly, and sell that data on. At the end of the day, you are not the customer that they're looking towards. You're the good.
Yeah. And so this is Rosen's work on the had been studying, and I can't see anything past 2018 when I've looked at his work, which I'm very interested to know what it is now, because I guess since then, with mobile phones, facial recognition, it's a lot straighter.
Yep.
But he had a sort of linear increase of, 2012, 2015, 2017, 2008. The number of times a day people were opening their mobile phone and the duration on it. So there were longer durations, less open. So back a decade ago, people might have been opening their mobile 30 times a day. 2018, it might have been more like 75 times a day. And I have no idea what it is in 2022, but I suspect it's more than that. And you're seeing a decrease in time on that phone as well. And to me, what scared me the most is I could be logged in, open the screen, and on some sort of social media without thinking about it. This has happened below consciousness. That scares me. The one thing I've done, and people, I need to move to the level of deleting apps and taking these things off and whatnot. They're a double-edged sword though, because they do have interesting uses as well. I collect a lot of the research that comes out new in some of these forms, people I follow and whatnot. But one switch that I made recently, there's in the endurance sport community that I'm quite heavily involved in, there's an app called Strava. The interesting thing about that is that actually what you do, if you want additional functionality, you pay for it. You are the customer. You're not, they don't advertise, they don't sell your data. You're the customer. And it's a very different social experience when you're the customer, not the commodity.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is the fact that with the rise of obviously TikTok and Instagram and the less than 60-second reel and the Twitter saying things in as fewer words as possible, our attention span has definitely shifted. We want things short and snappy and as snappy as possible. But there is a way to rebel against this, isn't there? There's these two sorts of concepts that are quite common: mind wandering and getting into a flow state. Do you want to talk about those?
Oh, yeah. So I first looked at this article that was out in Science, I think in 2012, 2013, where they studied the idea of mind wandering. The idea that actually we spend about half our waking time just, I don't know, what's one word for it? Daydreaming.
Yep.
Not really concentrating on doing anything. And sometimes that's intentional daydreaming, and it's what we call rumination, sort of worrying about things that have happened or could happen. That's actually a fairly poor negative state. But there's unintentional daydreaming, and that's actually highly associated with creativity and problem solving. Just the mind just freewheels it around. Some evidence that this mobile phone and device addiction hijacks that unintentional mind wandering, because instead of it just going off and looking out the window and thinking about things and the mind making the connections that it needs to, the brain, its biology and the neuroplasticity for that may not seem to happen. Whereas on the phone, and that's hijacked, it's taken away. So maybe daydreaming is actually a lost art, and particularly for our kids, the art of daydreaming and the neural connections made problem solved like that is not.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that, about the effect that not being bored will have on the next generation. I remember as a kid that the weekends where I was bored were the weekends I did the coolest stuff, because I was just left to think of the next thing to do. It really sparked creativity and go on a bit of an adventure. Whereas I watch my brother, who's about 14 years younger than me, and he doesn't have moments of bored. He always has a device. There's always something to entertain him. And I really wonder about the effect that that's going to have.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, isn't it? That when you ask someone, how was your weekend? No, I just hung out. I was bored. It's cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lost thing, especially for our kids. And it's hard to know what to do with that. Should we need to make them more bored? But yeah, I think dad on board. It's like, oh, isn't that awesome? Would be a great response. It's
Yeah,
not something. Love it.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
I think also just it helps them understand and interact with the environment. It promotes risk taking. If you're always behind a screen, the only real risks you're taking are whether you're going to download a virus on some sketchy website. You're not really understanding the way that you interact with the outside world, and I definitely think that's a lost art. But I'm encouraged by the fact that there's something we can do. There's this idea of getting into a flow state, and that's something that we should all be striving to do. Do you want to talk about that, Grant?
Well, yeah, flow has been such an interesting idea. So sports psychologists have been at this for decades, really, that I don't know, there's this altered state of immersion in an activity and the passage of time might either slow down or speed up. You're the adult male, that's what I am. Example, this might be in the back shed, your hobby. I don't know, all of a sudden the whole afternoon is just wild away in this beautiful state. Now, for many people, what drew them to the work they're in was if they found that work so engrossing and interesting that they got into it, but yet it's been destroyed by being pulled in and out of it by interruptions, by these devices and the way we try to live this crazy busy lifestyle rather than being this immersed lifestyle. So, again, I go to my writing. Writing might seem like hard work, but if you set it up right, it's one of the most beautiful, rewarding activities that I think a human can do to connect dots and come up with something original piece of thinking that has potential to help other people think. That's cool. Well, at least I think that's cool. One of the reasons I like exercise is in nature, especially things like mountain biking, where you're drawn into the moment because you have to be, otherwise you're going to crash.
Yeah.
Surfing's the same. You're either getting pummeled by waves, like surfing should really be called paddling by waves, because most of what you do is paddling out and hammered by waves. But even if you're paddling out or you're actually catching a wave and get on it, you are here now in this beautiful now state. And I think we've tried to commoditize that a bit more with mindfulness, mindful meditation. Those are all good things, but flow has been part of being a normal human. And again, partially the issue is that, I don't know, we've made a world that prevents us from accessing some of the best things about being a human, and that's really a shame, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like there's three real parts to flow, isn't there? There's this idea of narrowing the focus down to one thing. You talk about writing, and I'm a bit of a nerd myself, and I love to write. I love to connect ideas. And I do find that when you're in that space, all you're thinking about is like, what do I connect next? What fits with this? Um, and then that goal has to be meaningful to you. So if I was writing about, I don't know, the fashion or something that wasn't really connecting with myself and my values, I don't think I'd get into that flow state. It's when I'm writing about nutrition and exercise and stuff that I'm really passionate about. That's when the flow kind of comes. And the last thing is that it needs to be challenging, but not too challenging. So it's about finding that sweet spot. So I think don't expect to get into flow doing something that's brand new to you, because it might be too challenging. Take baby steps to get there would be my advice around this. What about you, Grant?
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm a small to medium small wave surfer, because I can do it at that point. I can stand up on my board and I can do it, but anything bigger than that, then it's just dangerous both for me and everyone else involved. So yeah, it's too challenging. So I do like that framework. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think now that we've had a really good chat about this sort of attention switching, multitasking, mind wandering, some of the issues with the current environment that we've built for ourselves, but is actually doing quite a detriment to us. If you want to read further about this, I'd really encourage you to listen to a couple of podcasts from Johann Hari or read his book, Stolen Focus. But now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into some really interesting student questions that we've had recently. And the first one is actually ties to this quite nicely. It's talking about pollution in the built environment and exercise and that sort of crossover. So one of our students is asking, for my clients who often live in quite a polluted atmosphere, what's the better option for that BDNF augmentation from exercise? Should they still exercise outdoors or should they maybe exercise indoors?
Yeah, I always find these questions hard, Kayla. So that's why you give them to me, right? They,
Yep.
I suppose that it's taking two healthy components and trying to go, is one more important than the other, where they're both important. So I think exercise is, one of the most effective medicines that we can have. Fitness is medicine. It's good for you to raise your heart rate, to take your muscles through a range of movement that they don't usually go, to challenge yourself physically, to generate some stress so you get the hormesis of that in your body and builds itself stronger than it was. So that's important. I think one of the great things about exercise is often you can do it outside and you get these additional benefits because the natural light is higher in the wavelength and melatonin, natural cycling of melatonin, sleep. A bunch of other neurotransmitters probably move the same way. You get probably nice air, you get into flow more easily because you're in those sorts of environments. But if you don't live in those sorts of environments, what do you have to do? I suppose you're going to
Mm,
exercise in them, because pollution and dirty air is actually harmful. It's still one of the leading causes of death in the world, from breathing in smoky, polluted air. So who would want to do that? But, my first response when you told me you're going to ask me this question was like, move, go somewhere nice. Which is a ridiculous answer, right? Because that's obviously not the real.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I still think it has some validity. But
Oh, absolutely. And I think there was a study done recently that showed that the levels of iron in the air that a lot of us breathe are actually really high. And there's some connections there with brain inflammation. So if you're living somewhere where it's sort of circa Beijing 2008, just before the Olympics, and there's those sorts of levels of pollution, then exercising outside is probably not a great idea. But we're all dealing with a level of pollution in the air that we breathe on a daily basis. Nobody's exempt from that due to the environment that we're in. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. Context. Context is important. Work with what you have and build from there. Just do what is within your means. And some exercise indoors is better than no exercise at all.
the other thing I learned the other day was that we've been thinking, you and I have been talking a lot about these obesogens, the things
Yep.
that chemicals in the environment can get to your body and disrupt the hormonal system in particular. We're talking a lot about bisphenols, plastic. It's a plastic that get into the food supply, and it's plastic. You can't buy a cucumber in this country without it being wrapped in plastic, which I've frankly found foods.
Oh, it drives me nuts.
Then honestly, so we're giving up on straws, at plastic straws and plastic bags and carry bags, but we just decided those two things should be out when in fact we've got everything else still. Ridiculous.
Yep.
Anyway, I think you're telling me that there's bisphenols in our lungs, and then internal environments and houses still have bisphenols in the air.
Yeah.
Oh my
So they're
gosh.
absolutely mind blowing. The idea that just opening a packet of crisps or something that's packaged in sort of that weird mixture of foil and plastic, just the process of opening one of those bags releases these bisphenols into the environment, and then we breathe those in. Um, so it's absolutely pervasive. And I mean, even if you tend towards a lower processed whole food diet, like you say, cucumbers are still wrapped in plastic. You go to the supermarket to buy tomatoes, they come in a plastic container. So it's really hard to get away from, that's for sure.
Yeah, the tomato one, the cucumber one annoys me the most, and number two are tomatoes in
Yeah.
those soft plastic containers. Disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to jump onto one more question, and then we're probably going to wrap up. So this is a challenging question. It's about how sleep is affected in women by alcohol and estrogen. So the student is asking, is there something unique that happens when there are higher or lower levels of estrogen or progesterone present or absent? And how does this interact with alcohol?
Oh my goodness. So I think when I'm answering this question, I'll tell you how I'd start to dissect this and go, well, and they're all individual components, right? So first of all,
Yeah.
let's examine alcohol, and then we'll think about the interaction after that.
Yep.
And if there is evidence around it. So alcohol and sleep. So alcohol raises GABA, and GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and it makes you feel sleepy and actually helps you fall asleep. So alcohol has a positive effect, I suppose, at one level, because you sleep more easily. However, what it does is doesn't allow glutamate to come back like it needs to, which is the excitatory neurotransmitter, and it needs to when you go into REM sleep or dreaming sleep. And that sleep is crucial, of course, for neuroplasticity and problem solving. And so with alcohol, you don't have, you diminish the quality of REM sleep, or you have enough, you're eliminated altogether. And so, and probably because alcohol is a diuretic and you've had it in the form of extra fluid, you're going to have to get up more times to go to the toilet in the night. And so that sleep quality is known to be disrupted by alcohol. So that's the first thing. So if you're not sleeping well, alcohol's not going to help. If you're drinking a lot, that could be part of what's hurting.
Yep.
So that's the first thing I would think. And then go, well, actually, what about sleep through a normal menstrual cycle? But, how many women actually in that category because of the one involves birth controls and other things like that as well?
Yep.
So, more about me. Well, there's probably evidence that when estrogen's higher and the follicular phase, and probably sleep quality is better, probably during the luteal phase as progesterone raises, metabolic rate goes up. There's some evidence that sleep might be better. So I suppose if you're going to drink, it would have the least effect on women when estrogen was higher. That said, I think alcohol also probably interferes with estrogen a bit as well. I'm not sure, and actually the one to be answering that, Kayla, because in fact, this question is the sort of stuff that you nerd out on and go home and study in your spare time. So what have you got on it?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I suppose that's why there's evidence that going into menopause, when estrogen is dropping off and progesterone is a bit higher comparatively, that skipping that glass of wine or that gin and tonic is probably a good idea, because not only is there the effect of the alcohol itself, it's the fact that estrogen actually is profoundly linked to a lot of the detoxification pathways in the body. And so when you're bombarding your body with more toxins than you have in a normal day, you're definitely going to feel it, and it is going to have an effect on your sleep. And I mean, there are things that you can do to offset this and help those detoxification pathways along the way. And cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts have been shown to definitely help. So if you are going to have a glass of wine, maybe have it next to a wonderful stir fry with some good fats in it. But yeah, I don't think the research is too solid in this space at the moment. I think that we're definitely, like we spoke about in our last podcast, women are definitely understudied. And I do think that as we head into this new area of precision nutrition and sort of really focusing on the individual, recently there was a big call from some of the biggest nutrition societies in the world that we need to do more work with women. So for me, that's promising. And I think we will learn a lot in the coming years. But yeah, definitely, if you're in the front end of your cycle when estrogen's high, a glass of wine or two won't be the end of the world. But don't overdrink.
Agree. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. That's Ask Me Anything podcast with PREKURE Prevention is Cure. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for being involved. And if you've got some questions that you want aired that we can talk about and discuss or issues, then email us info@prekure.com and we'll get right onto it. Thanks, Kayla.
Thanks, Grant. We'll see you all next time.